you gonna do now, Ray Ray?
Oh, whoa, whoa. I need the love, baby. I got every day. I got every hour. I need the love, baby. Like set my soul on fire.
Hi, welcome to the Jeff Green Show, starring me, Jeff Green. I'll be here for the next couple hours talking. Oh yeah, there's a couple other guys with me too. We got Luke Smith.
Hello.
And we got Nguy Kroll.
Bonjour. I'm in Canada, so I'm going to kick it French today.
Nice. Did you like my new intro for our show?
I loved it. I'm just honored to be on the same podcast on the Jeff Green Show starring Jeff Green. It's been a dream of mine for a long time, and now I can finally say, made it, Ma, top of the world.
I'm going to tell you guys a little secret. I think it's going to get us more chicks with this new intro.
Why? Help me understand that. What's the?
It's just my je ne sais quoi. I don't know. It's a pheromones thing. To go past that awkward pause, we'll point out that our two compadres are not here today. So those who are most interested in hearing those two guys can probably hit off already right now, and that's Sean Elliott, not here this week, or Robert Ashley. And do we know why Sean's not with us this week?
No, he was actually remarkably vague in his mail. He was like, "I'll not be here," probably in a funny voice, and then Robert Ashley had technology explode in his face.
Uh-huh.
I think it's secretly an excuse, and both of them are off having romantic weekends with their lady friends,
or with each other.
Could be some dude on dude 69.
Wow, that got remarkably specific.
It did. I think that's just what we'll assume it was, unless we hear otherwise. So you heard it here first. Robert Ashley, Sean Elliott, off having a romantic tryst together this week instead of being on Out of the Game. And I think it couldn't happen to a couple of nicer guys.
We wish them the best.
Yeah. So what do we want to talk about this week?
You haven't seen Star Trek yet, which is really shitty, because we could have talked about Star Trek, because you and I even talked earlier this week, Jeff, about we talked about the problems with being a fan, and
yeah.
Maybe this will jump into something, or maybe it'll just be a long rambly load of crap. But I was thinking about it after I saw Star Trek, and I've seen it twice now. I saw it twice opening weekend. I saw it once on the Friday that it came out with buddies from work, and then once Sunday with another group of friends. And I really liked it, but I didn't have any of the existing baggage. I never watched any Star Trek growing up. It was never a part of my nerd socialization. It just wasn't part of that experience at all. So when I'm reading the internet and how people feel about Star Trek, I'm actually really glad to not be a fan of Star Trek, because if I was, I'm sure there'd be any number of things about it that irritated me and pissed me off. But instead, I just got to enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it, which really got me thinking about sort of the cost of fandom, and how it's awesome that people do get really excited about stuff, but when they hold it so closely that they can no longer enjoy the alternative.
Right.
This, you can apply this to almost anything. Then it's
Absolutely.
Well, the price of being a fan is pretty expensive.
Right. I don't want to immediately tailspin this into horrible message board trolling, but you immediately made me think of the Fallout franchise as soon as you started talking just now.
That's exactly what came to my mind.
Because, we obviously know what happened there in terms of the fan community with Fallout and the expectations over Fallout 3 over the years. And I've ranted about that before in public, so I don't really want to dredge that up again too much. But it's exactly what you're saying, Luke, that the baggage that these own fans had, it almost made them impossible, not just to enjoy it, but to even want to enjoy it.
Well, the thing is when is sometimes, well, let me step back a second. So part of, fandom, and I don't know if it's extreme fandom or just fandom in general, is what happens to creative people when fans feel like they have ownership, or at least partial ownership or shared ownership over the franchise in question. I think I may have mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I was having dinner with one of the guys from id, and we were talking about Quake Live, and he was talking about guys who, you know, they would make changes and, you know, to the code and things like that, for very good reason, and they would get emails from people in the beta test who had, you know, been playing Quake 3 at least a couple times a day, every day since it came out, and I said to him, I said, well, what's it like developing in the face of people who, at least from the consumer experience side, know the game probably better than anyone at id? Because I can guarantee that there's no one at id, or almost no one at id, who played Quake 3 Arena every day since it came out. You know, there are probably a number of guys who worked on it that are gone. You know, and so it's like you look at fans who maintain wikis and, you know the lore and study, you know, Lost frame by frame and things like that. You know, what is the responsibility of the creator or creators to those people, and when is, you know, nerd rage justified? I mean, I would personally think it was pretty justified based on the last 4 Star Wars movies, if you include Clone Wars.
Yeah, and look what happened.
Right to the heart.
Someone had to go there. Someone
want to go right to the dark place.
Yeah,
the bad spot.
Well, I think that Lucas has the luxury of being so rich that he doesn't have to listen to anyone, right?
But
right, I mean, absolutely, and clearly he doesn't.
That's probably part of it. I mean, he's not getting. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe he is piped into the Force.net and, like, he's a secret moderator there and he's always reading. But something tells me that that's not the case. And so he's not ultimately concerned with, you know, I mean, he has so much money and losing fans. Like, it's probably not a concern of his. Like, he just wants to do what he wants to do with the franchise, which a bunch of kids pointed out on the internet that Star Trek is now like the cool, mature, like awesome reboot, and the new Star Wars is now like the lol, it's for kids. You know, I feel like I've chose poorly.
Right, and what do you say about what the Wachowskis did, going from the first Matrix, which is almost jewel-like in its perfection, to, you know, increasingly flawed? I mean, I'm sure, I know from talking to friends, I'm in the minority, but even though I fully acknowledge the superiority of the first movie over the second, I actually like the second one. Actually holds an even more special place in my heart, or differently special place in my heart, just because I like the way they sort of took the original concepts with it and twisted them and fucked with them and just sort of went nuts. And like, for me, the 3 long monologues with the Oracle, the Merovingian, and the Architect, like, I just love getting lost in the twistiness of that shit. Like, these guys brought, like, you know, philosophy 101 to the masses through an action movie, and I thought that was cool. But that said, you know, I will freely acknowledge that what the Wachowskis lost going from the first movies to the second and third was that the first one had like an almost perfect, you know, ratio of being in the Matrix to out of the Matrix. Because while the out of the Matrix stuff is what sort of set the stakes, the in the Matrix stuff was, you know, that was what was cool. That was what we loved and wanted to see. And the other thing was just sort of how they built up the menace of the agents, so that when Neo is finally alone with Mr. Smith, you're just like, fuck, how is he going to survive this? And then I read it wasn't so much an interview, because by the second and third ones, they weren't talking. So other people were talking for them, and someone with the team, might have been the producer or someone else, said that what they wanted to do was have the second one be 2/3 in the Matrix, a third outside, and the third one to be a third inside and 2/3 outside. And I think they at least in the second one, they stayed like too true to what they had set up, which was the idea of Neo as Superman. So he was only vulnerable in the second one, other than to what was mysteriously going on with Mr. Smith, he was only really vulnerable by the extent the other people around him were vulnerable, whether that was Trinity or Morpheus or that kind of stuff. And so while they didn't cheat and sort of have like a, sort of like an Uber Neo who could take him down, you had the multiplicity of Mr. Smith, but it just started to, certain things that I could see how they wouldn't have realized that they were essential to what made the first one good, started getting peeled away. And so that's even in the middle of a franchise. It's not even that was done over a relatively short period of time. It wasn't even over the span of time that Lucas had. And what I found particularly disturbing about some of the things that Lucas did, and it's summed up in midichlorians, is, dude, no one fucking asked for a scientific explanation of the Force. No one was asking for that. And he just went with this thing, and you're just like, wow. I remember saying all he had to do in the first episode was like, it was like Knights of the Round Table in Star Wars. All you have to do is, there's a disturbance in the Force, the good guys get the kid, they lose the kid, they get him back. That's it. That's all he had to do, and completely screwed it up.
Well, it was. I don't know if I'm trampling on childhood memories of yours, Luke, of Episode 1. But to me, it was just one of the all-time clusterfucks and disappointments in movie history. I mean, I would say all three of those movies, but one in particular.
If you teleport back in time to 1999, wasn't that movie pretty well reviewed? I'm pretty sure that it was.
Gosh,
it might have been. So. It might have been fresh even on Rotten Tomatoes.
I will dispute your memory, but I don't know. Someone can check the Rotten Tomatoes.
I'm doing it right now. It's happening. Because I seem to remember it getting like reasonably good reviews. I mean, Ebert liked it. I don't know if he's still the watermark for enjoyability. He didn't like Star Trek.
He doesn't like video games, so I don't listen to anything he says.
Really, he didn't like Star Trek.
That's a joke. By the way.
Everybody likes Star Trek.
No, he didn't. He gave it a rotten.
Did he really? Wow.
Yeah. Apparently, the entire internet is currently searching for the Phantom Menace Rotten Tomato score. On Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, the server's not crashing. I think that Episode 1 was, it had a lot of goodwill going into it too, just because of the, decades of hype and decades of anticipation. So there was probably some of that going into it. But I remember being in the theater on opening night along with every other nerd, and just, half an hour into it, just my jaw just agape at how bad it was. I mean,
because they're like bumbling around underwater, and there's Jamaicans everywhere. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, like yeah. I just was like, I thought it was like the joke reel of the movie. Like, wait, when are they actually starting Episode 1? Because this can't be for real. This can't be what we've waited for. So I guess in that case, I was one of the, I was part of the nerd fan wanting my franchise to be something other than what the creator said it was. I was completely guilty. What's going on there? Someone's watching.
Yeah, wow.
No, we muted it. It's all good. I was gonna say, so I saw it at Man's Chinese on opening day. With my friend Cheo Coker, who's a screenwriter, and we ran into Elvis Mitchell, who I guess I think he still does a show on NPR about movies, and he was one of the Times movie critics for a while. So we ran into him online, and we all went in and saw it, and I still remember like the lights went down and fans went nuts. The first trailer went up and the fans went nuts just because it was the first trailer. And then the 20th Century Fox logo came up and they went nuts. And the Lucasfilm, like, it was just, I mean, people were so wanting to have a good time. And then they still cheered and they did applaud the end, but I felt, and it's probably in my head, but I think I'm fairly sensitive to sort of the collective energy of an audience, and I felt like they were being deflated throughout the movie, and it's understandable. And I don't know enough about George Lucas to question his creative process, but it definitely seemed like the first one was, in terms of casting Jake Lloyd and going for kid, is he wanted to go. It was like he wanted to have the first one almost be a kid's movie in some ways. Like he's like, well, how do I truly hook the next generation to maximize the audience potential? And that just leads to awkward stuff like, the kid practically flirting with Padma and just all this other stuff. And you're just like, dude, why don't you just start it much closer to the kid being being grown up. I mean, I keep saying to people, there's only one image from the entire second trilogy that I found striking, and it was the one where Darth Maul, where the shields have dropped down between the two, you've got Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan on one side and him on the other, and he's just pacing back and forth and kind of snorting like a bull, waiting for the shields to lift so they can fight again. And I was just like, okay, that was cool. And everything else was just kind of like,
Yeah, I can't even give that moment a pass. To me, it was just completely awful. And actually, my only real long-standing memory of all those hours I wasted in all three of those movies is laughing out loud with the rest of the audience at the awkward Hayden Christensen reading of "Your skin is soft" or whatever it was, not rough like the sand or whatever. That horrendous line reading that busted up the entire theater. To me, that was the epitome of what had happened with those three movies.
But going back to our point, it's like, I mean, is it that we're sensitive when it's stuff that we're fans about? I mean, this sounds just obvious, but when it's stuff that we're not fans about, we're less sensitive about it. So, Luke, I mean, I don't know, were you a Star Wars fan? But it sounds like you might have put a little more thought into the ways in which Lucas went wrong or deviated from what made Star Wars great, as opposed to how J.J. Abrams may have gotten certain things wrong or deviated from what made Star Trek great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just my familiarity with the source material sets my expectations that things are going to be a certain way, and then when they're not a certain way, I'm angry and or butthurt. And then in the Star Trek universe, where I have no expectations beyond like memes, basically, and archetypes around the characters contained within the fiction, when I see, Chris Pine, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. He looks like Kirk to me. Blonde guy, waved hair. Sure, looks good.
Here's what I'm going to argue, though. I think that the second trilogy of Star Wars movies, though, are just objectively terrible. I think as movies, they just suck. And that you don't have to be a fan or a non-fan to make that distinction. They just don't hold up to me in any way. There's no compelling dramatic arc. The acting is terrible. The effects, even at that time, seem lame to me. I mean, I think they're just bad movies. And the example I can give as empirical evidence of that is my daughter, who was about, 6, 7, 8 at the time those came out, who had no familiarity with the original trilogy and no baggage associated with it. And we watched those three on DVD, the originals, and then saw the movies in order as they came out, the new ones, and she hated them. Guys, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, your daughter's a tastemaker, dude.
Well, I don't think I'm not like, the point isn't to be bragging about how awesome my daughter is, though she is, but it's more that, even at that age, I think she was able to recognize, a kid was able to recognize a good movie from a bad movie.
Well, apparently the movie critics all over the world couldn't. Phantom Menace, 64% fresh. Clone, 67% fresh. Revenge of the Sith, 80% fresh.
Good God.
Wow.
Okay.
And I think we would probably all agree that they got less bad, sort of, as they got closer to the climactic moment. But that's another thing. So I guess in a weird way we're transitioning a bit from the fan stuff, though we should continue to talk about it, but also to sort of like talk about rebooting or filling in. And one of the things that is dangerous about prequels is, to a certain extent, the past is already defined. And so how much opportunities do you really have for surprise? And I'll maintain that, Lucas, apparently is a history buff, and so went nuts with his whole thing, the thing starting with over taxation in the credit scroll in the first movie and stuff like that. But I'm just like, dude, really? Is that really where you're going to start this thing? But even by those standards, even by the challenge of saying, okay, we're doing a prequel, the end point of the prequel is pretty defined, because it's where the presumably the other movie starts, and so how do you fill that stuff in an interesting way? I still maintain that he picked many of the least interesting ways to fill the history. I guess the only thing sort of being like maybe interesting to me was the Boba Fett cloning kind of stuff, as the stormtroopers, but I just... or Boba Fett's father.
I think he just got too wrapped up in his own bullshit. I mean, the same way that I think that the Wachowskis did. I mean, when Star Wars 1 came out, we weren't Star Wars groupies. We weren't Star Wars nerds. I mean, it was just a great movie. That movie was
You mean Star Wars 4. That was technically the fourth film.
Right. I mean, the first one that came out, Star Wars 4. Thank you. Thank you, Star Wars nerd. That it had such great, it had such a cultural impact on in this country, and I guess all over the world, just because it was such a great time at the movies. And having grown up in the 70s, I remember that what a landmark that movie was, mostly because it was so retro. It was so retro to an earlier time in the movies, especially when what you had coming out in the 1970s was very morally ambiguous stuff. If The Godfather was one of the greatest hits of the 70s, and of course is a landmark movie, it was still very much an anti-hero movie, right? I mean, who do we root for in The Godfather? Well, a lot of us were rooting for them, even though they were completely horrible, evil people. Well, Star Wars sort of set that back into this is just a good old family film. We know clearly who the good guys and bad guys are. And on top of that, you had some really dynamic acting personalities like Harrison Ford. You can watch that movie fresh today, and it's still just fun. It's irrelevant to knowing the whole fucking Star Wars universe. And I don't think that the rest of the movies or the second trilogy tap into that kind of spirit at all.
Well, I think you hit one of the most important reasons that the prequels or episodes 1 through 3 are inferior is it reminded me of how much how much Han Solo and Harrison Ford's performance of Han Solo really made those movies. It sort of took the piss, as the British would say, and sort of, made that, it made it tolerable. I mean, there's a famous line that George Lucas, the exchange between Harrison Ford and George Lucas, where Harrison Ford's talking about the script, and he says, George, you can type this shit, but you sure as hell can't say it.
Right.
And, he managed to take those lines, which maybe sometimes you go back now and look at them and they're some of them could be corny, and just made them really work and sing. And, that was, there wasn't that presence in the second, the prequels. And so you had terrific actors like Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson and others who were just trapped under this script and this production. And the other thing too is that you could see, if you ever looked at the extras and things like that, is just how much stuff was done on blue screen and how much stuff was done without the presence of even other actors. So These people are completely acting in a vacuum, and you're just like, dude, his complete faith in CG over all things. I mean, it collapsed under that weight. But looking at other types of reboots, I mean, look at how successful Marvel was with the Ultimate line. Ultimate line with Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, the Ultimates, and those kinds of things, and they're interacting with their fan base on a comic by comic basis. Each book coming out on a monthly basis, and they introduced, and they tried it before. I mean, there was the New Universe attempt at a reboot, and other things they've done. And New Universe, that wasn't really a reboot, I guess. They established a whole new universe, which is why I guess was called New Universe. But I mean, here was this major reboot, and it really worked and brought a number of their titles, I guess, in some ways into the 20th century, and started, basically picking and choosing elements of the past that they wanted to preserve, in interesting ways, and helping attract new audiences to them. And I don't know if you guys read any of those books, but I thought creatively a number of them worked really well.
I did at the time, and I enjoyed them quite a bit. I just want to also point out that when or if Sean and Robert Ashley listen to this podcast, they're going to be laughing their asses off that we spent all this time talking about Star Wars.
Hey, while the cat's away, the mice will play. Drink it up.
We can't help it if our midichlorian counts are high.
To get back onto it, Ngai, did you see Star Trek?
I did see Star Trek. I did.
And were you a Trekkie or Trekker or whatever the correct term is?
Not really. I mean, like, you know, the original Star Trek was in reruns when I was a kid. I was born in 1972. So I'd see episodes every now and again, but I wasn't an avid watcher. I did watch a fair amount of Next Generation episodes, but not like I wasn't assiduous about it. It was just sort of, I'd watch some and not others. And I watched some of the movies, and some of the movies were good, some of them weren't. But I liked the writing in the new Star Trek. My beef was more with if there was a beef, was with the direction, which I felt like. Luke will know what I'm talking about. We'll see if he agrees. But just the opening ship to ship battle and the camera, you've got these frequent sort of pans, not quite shaky, but from left to right, and I just kind of felt like the action that was taking place on screen was more lucid than the filming of it. And I just kind of felt like he'd, writing-wise, the Transformers writers and, JJ, to the extent that he supervised the script, had set up, some fairly strong moments that were being undercut by the way it was being directed and scored. And I just felt like a lot of the battle sequences and action sequences were way more frantic than they needed to be. And, maybe he fancies himself the next Paul Greengrass, but, and I had this Twitter exchange with some people this week, but I think Paul Greengrass is one of I tend to prefer action sequences that play out in longer takes where you can really see it, and I feel like the sort of the hectic, fast-cutting style that a lot of American action directors in particular have, when you lose the sense of the geography of an action sequence, then you get confused and it stops really mattering. It's a false way of jacking up the intensity, and one of the few people I think who manages, who's the exception, who proves the rule, is Paul Greengrass. And I think with the second and third Bourne movies, particularly the fight that culminates in a bathroom in Tangiers between Jason Bourne and an assassin that's been sent to kill Julia Stiles' character, for the cuts and all those things, like, I never lose sight of where I am, and I feel like the way he edits those sequences, really ratchet up, not a fake intensity, but something that feels like it approximates my cinematic idea of what it would be to be fighting for someone's life, fighting for your life, and then taking someone else's life. And that's why I like him.
I agree with you 1,000%, Ngai. We had this argument, a few of us, on Quarter to Three many months ago with Quantum of Solace, and I was definitely in the camp that had huge problems with that movie because of the frenetic cutting of those action sequences, which I felt totally just sapped all of it of any kind of suspense or meaning. If you remember the boat chase and even the car chase at the beginning, I spent the whole time in both those scenes, and I don't think it's just because I'm old or whatever, just going like, huh? Wait, what? Wait, which car is that? Wait, huh? How'd he get over the boat? It was just too much. It was too much fast cutting, and not just that it was confusing, but I also felt like it was cheap. I felt like it was sort of manufactured intensity rather than actual intensity, and that some of what makes those old action movies, and by old I mean like 70s or even 80s great, is those long takes that you're talking about, where a lot of it is actually seeing stunts happen or wondering how the hell they even managed to pull that off. Whereas if you're going to cut every half a second from some other different angle, well, I don't know, that doesn't feel like human human feats of amazingness to me. That's just a guy with a great scissors in the editing room.
I like that manufactured intensity. It's almost like what one would assume would be the Chomskyite critique of action sequences. But I think you're absolutely right, and that's what Quantum of Solace, Casino Royale, which was directed by Martin Campbell, who I think has now directed either 2 or 3 of the Bond movies. I think he definitely directed GoldenEye, and I feel that with Casino Royale, I felt that Martin Campbell sort of updated his style slightly.
Yeah.
But kept everything like really lucid. And for a movie like where you've got some nice action sequences up top, and then you've got a fairly long poker sequence, and then it sort of picks up, and then there's a sort of like 3 weeks later kind of thing, they managed to create remarkable intensity throughout that whole movie. And absolutely, I mean, I think, you know, when you think of the Jackie Chans and Jet Lis of the world, you know, part of what's amazing about their Hong Kong movies is that sense of peril, is that sense of seeing the stunt play out in front of your eyes. In a weird way, that builds intensity far more than a cut does.
Exactly. I mean, I wanted to see him. Wait, who's the actor again in Quantum of Solace?
Daniel
What's
Craig.
that dude's name? Thank you. I wanted to see Daniel Craig jump over the boat. I didn't want to see the edited aftermath of that. I mean, that was ridiculous. And that, to me, that's what made all those old Bond movies so awesome, was seeing Sean Connery doing what, even if it was trick photography, it doesn't matter. Even if in the end there was a double being used, you were still seeing some guy performing a stunt. Whereas I didn't even really ever see that in Quantum of Solace. Goddamn movies today. Fuck them all.
No, but the thing is, if there's another example, I mean, so yes, Quantum of Solace, not as good as the original, but I will say that at least the script sort of carrying the through line from, one of the things I did like about the script, or a couple things, is one, that they, as problematic as that car chase was at the start, I did like the fact where it's revealed that essentially it picks up minutes after the first one ended. And the fact that they really sort of tracked his grief and desire for revenge, over what had happened to Vesper, also really dug.
I'm with you on that. And I love Daniel Craig. Complete man crush on him, especially as Bond. So, I mean, I don't think it was a disaster anywhere near like the other movies we've talked about. But just about this one point about the editing is where I really had a problem.
Yeah, and when you the other movie that I think about, and again, I am getting old, so I'm starting to repeat myself. So if I said this before on a previous podcast, please shoot me. But one of the things that's really interesting is that if Batman Begins, which I thought was another terrific franchise reboot, so if Batman Begins rebooted the Burton and really ultimately the Joel Schumacher Batmans, The Dark Knight was actually a partial reboot of Batman Begins, and very few critics picked up on it. But I guess the best way I can say it is that while Batman Begins was more grounded in the real world than the previous Warner Brothers Batman movies, they still had stuff like the elevated train line that terminated in Bruce Wayne's office building, and they had which is plausible, but the fear gas and like all of these other things. So they did maintain certain fantastical elements. Whereas the Dark Knight, they grounded it way more in the real world. They have a nod to the Joker's Smilex gas in the very first scene, but it turns out that it's not, the guy does not die as a result of, a rictus grin on his face. And, he went to Hong Kong, he went to a real place, and they just, the opening action sequence is way more reminiscent of, something like Heat. Whereas you compare the first one, they sort of in the prison, it had a reality to it, but there's also an aspect that sort of felt like, that was happening on a backlot. And this one was just way, way more grounded in the real world. And speaking of reboots, what was amazing about the first one to me was that they found, if I'm not mistaken, the one part of the Batman mythos that had never been told, which is what did he do between leaving Gotham and coming back? And the second one, they created the definitive Joker. I mean, I've read The Killing Joke, I've read a number of the other top Joker stories, and between the writing and Heath Ledger's performance, to me, DC now has to go back and reinvent the Joker in light of what they did in that movie.
Yeah, I almost sort of would wish they would just stop now after those two. Because they were both so awesome. I don't want to see it get wrecked now.
No faith in the Nolan brothers and David Goyer's ability to stay on the high wire?
Well, they are extremely talented at what they do. There's no question. And Christian Bale, I love him too. I just don't know how they're going to top Dark Knight. I don't even know if it's worth trying.
What was your take on The Dark Knight, Luke?
Oh God, I'll try not to. I mean, I absolutely loved The Dark Knight, and just like you said earlier, and I was pretty familiar with things like The Killing Joke, and had a pretty good idea of what I wanted the Joker to be, and I do feel like Ledger sort of defined what the Joker was in a way that maybe hadn't really been done since, differently, but hadn't been done as effectively since Mark Hamill's Joker in the animated series, which still, I think, to this day is a pretty interesting and incredible take on the Joker. They're going to do a third one. I have no clue what it's going to be.
Oh yeah, there's no
no clue how well it's going to be done. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Like, where are the other super cool, compelling Batman villains? Like, I don't really know that I've ever had a huge comic book nerd boner for any of Batman's other villains. So
right. Well, it's. I mean, you know, they obviously. I mean, it's sad in so many ways that, you know, what happened with Heath Ledger. I mean, he made an impression on me from. I never saw First Night, which I think was his sort of Hollywood debut, but I did say 10 Things I Hate About You. I thought he was good in that, and he was just a terrific actor, and so that's sad. And they didn't, obviously, how could they? But you realize the structure that they had didn't account for that, because what they did was they killed off Two-Face, but they kept the Joker alive, and so now, like, how do you recast that role?
I got 2 words for you: Seth Rogen.
He's available.
Yeah.
I was going to say that my choice is a little more seriously. If I were to do it, my choices would probably be, the people who come to mind are Ryan Gosling, maybe, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I feel like, maybe those guys could kind of pull it off. But it's just, I mean, following in those footsteps is just so hard. I mean, he completely defined the role.
I would not want to be the actor taking over Heath Ledger's Joker role. No. That would be pretty thankless. And I know that Adrian Brody actually was originally one of the top contenders for that role, by the way.
Interesting. He's a good actor. I mean,
yep.
Maybe in aging, if they aged it up a bit and sort of went with the Dark Knight from the comic series, you could get like a Daniel Day-Lewis in there. I could see him drinking Christian Bale's milkshake.
Sure. An older Joker.
Exactly. But there was a fan poster that someone did, sort of teasing a third movie. So it has nothing to do with the official production or what they're doing. And what it was it had sort of like a ransom note feel of it. And the implication was sort of Seven meets the Riddler. And I could see that being a provocative way. So that if this second movie, if The Dark Knight was, in some ways, if you go off the opening, his Heat, then the third one could be Christopher Nolan's Seven or something like that. But I guess one of the lines that, just cycling back to Star Wars to jump off it again to something else, is something I said, and I can't remember if I stole it from someone else or made it up, but was the idea is that, what if sometimes, so we make fun of fans and their intensity sometimes, but what if sometimes the creator is not the most effective caretaker of their own franchise? And something that comes to mind on that is what happened going from The Silence of the Lambs to Hannibal. And I'm not even yet talking about the movies and what happened there. So apparently, and this is somewhat conjecture, it's been reported, but somewhat conjecture, because Thomas Harris, the author, doesn't really give interviews. But apparently he was really bothered by the feminist take on Clarice Starling that both Jonathan Demme and Jodie Foster had, and I think as well with sort of the stamp that they had put on it, and that's part of the reason why the book Hannibal turned out the way it did, with this kind of destruction almost of the Clarice Starling character, and all these other things, and just sort of taking it like even in this more sort of almost unfilmable direction, which then Ridley Scott proceeded to recast and put on film. And it was just sort of like, I mean, Thomas Harris is a fairly terrific pop writer. I mean, Black Sunday is very good, Red Dragon is very good, and Silence of the Lambs is very good. But, that's got to be an interesting position for a creator to be in, that, you created these characters, and apart from some things that they wisely left out from Silence of the Lambs, like a little more detail on the FBI director's character and stuff like that, Silence of the Lambs is a pretty stunning adaptation.
Well, I think that this is a case where, and I think Thomas Harris is an okay pop writer, but this was a case where he got a better movie than the writing deserved. I mean, you have a world-class director in Jonathan Demme and Jodie Foster, one of the greatest actresses of our generation, and this movie did not, this Silence of the Lambs could have been a TV movie, really, but instead he turned this into a major film, which I think was really better than the source material. So that's my take on it.
How old were you when Silence of the Lambs came out, Luke? Could you even go see it in the theater by yourself?
Absolutely not. No, I was so young, I wasn't even allowed to go see Batman 1 in the theater.
Wow.
Yeah, so just for some context. I was
already 90 by then, so.
I saw Silence of the Lambs much later, when I was a little bit older. My then girlfriend and I watched it in the basement. It's horrifying and scary.
Yeah, I just love the way that Jonathan Demme, like, just from the start, the whole thing of, the camera POV of Jodie Foster running through the woods. She gets summoned off the training course to go see the director, and in the elevator, she's surrounded by guys, because Jodie Foster is fairly short herself, and she's surrounded by guys who are all taller than her in the elevator. So, but you see it from the camera on her level, so you see all these guys in the blue FBI sweaters at chest level. The whole like finding the head. I mean, it's just like this compilation of childhood fears and fairy tale fable fears and like all of those things, and I mean, just so well done. And for me, because I hadn't read the book before I saw the movie, spoiler alert, I guess, for younger fans who maybe haven't seen it, younger listeners, but just the whole thing, like when you realize that the FBI is at the wrong house and she's at the right house, and just it's such a well done movie, and what happens there? It's like those kinds of things. So all of those things sort of enter into that. Critique of fandom, and that's where I feel like, look, I mean, even taking it to sort of games, which we're out of the game, we don't have to talk about games, but in the now somewhat aborted Symposium, I guess we should get on Sean's case and find out when he's going to bring it back.
Yeah, Sean, where's our Symposium, dude?
But that was one of the things that we sort of got to, I think, in our second round, which is that who is the most effective, who's the best person to review a game? Is it someone who is a fan of the franchise? Is it someone who's a newcomer? Because that's one of the things about fans is that, is by virtue of the intensity of their affection for the material, they at least ought to be more knowledgeable about it than a newcomer. So, I mean, are the people who are the Trekkies and Trekkers, are they the best to critique what J.J. Abrams has done with the new Star Wars, or is there something that we assume is over the edge about the intensity of it, and therefore we should discount it?
Well, speaking as a former magazine editor, my approach to that would be, it's an interesting perspective to have somebody who's unfamiliar with a franchise look at a franchise if they're knowledgeable in that genre. Certainly, somebody like a Sean Elliott could look at the third or fourth version of a strategy series that he's not familiar with and provide cogent critique. But for the most part, what I would want would be somebody who was familiar with the games but was still able to maintain a kind of journalistic distance from it and be able to look at it without, having a fucking spaz because some guy has, I don't know, a tattoo on his right buttock instead of his left or whatever it is, So I think the familiarity certainly helps if you're talking about gameplay that's evolving or a storyline that's evolving and whether this is living up to the past. But on the other hand, I wouldn't want any of that to overwhelm the ability of that writer to be able to tell people who have never played this before why they should give a shit or not.
Okay, so I get that. I mean, but for both of you guys, you guys, I don't know if probably maybe not directly or maybe it doesn't get to you, but you must at least at some point have to account for fans and their tastes in terms of the work you do. So without giving away any sort of trade secrets, I mean, what are thoughts that you guys have had on the fans of the work that you do now?
I mean, just to quickly run the gamut. I mean, it really goes from, oh God, that's a really good idea, to, oh, that's a really good point, to, are you high? I mean, it's sort of it all buckets pretty neatly into something along that spectrum, and that's not to disregard the "are you high" perspective, but yeah, I mean, we definitely have a pretty vibrant and active group of fans that we really wouldn't trade for anything. So, I mean, those guys are not only supportive with their suggestions, but also with their sometimes vindictive approaches to problems we're trying to solve as well.
Excellent non-answer, Luke.
Thanks.
Brilliant. No, what do you mean non-answer, though? He gave away their classification system.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
With me, I don't know if this is it's really the same thing. I mean, I'm in the Sims group, but I'm not on the main core franchise, which is, I guess, coming out in a couple weeks. I was certainly privy to a lot of discussion about it, and certainly that's where a lot of the internal angst was in terms of satisfying the legions of Sims 1 and Sims 2 fans with Sims 3, while also reaching out to a newer audience and maybe younger audience or people who weren't around when Sims 1 and 2 came out. So I'm aware that was certainly, a very high concern in their minds. Though, again, because I'm not part of that team, I'm not really privy to what the specifics were of that. So I'm also giving a non-answer.
Well, what do you guys? I was curious to know what you guys thought about, in newspapers, certain newspapers anyway, the Times, and others, they have an ombudsman or ombudsperson, someone who speaks, the reader representative. They speak on behalf of the readers, go behind the scenes, and are empowered to report on the institution, to get answers to questions the readers have. Does that make sense? Is it a good idea? I'm playing devil's advocate a bit, but that, the top franchises with lots of fans, that there should be a fan ombudsman. That someone who is, I don't know if they're elected by the community or hired by the franchise, but someone who represents the fan perspective. And an extension of that same question is, how much stock do you guys place in fan ownership of what you do?
Well, hopefully, some of those ombudsman-type people are on your team already, and can look at it as objectively as possible. That's not that possible, but you know what I'm saying? Hopefully people on the team are already fans, and so they're feeling that kind of protective ownership themselves. But that said, I know that at EA they bring in the Sims fan community people quite a bit to do focus testing and things like that. So I know that and I'm certain that's the same thing where Luke is. I'm sure most smart game companies are not completely ignoring the fan community and what they want. I think that would just be dumb.
Yeah,
you don't have to take everything they say with as gospel. I mean, as somebody who got mail every day working on a magazine, a lot of it hate mail. Some of it you would just go, okay, well, this guy's an idiot. But every once in a while, even if the letter was harsh, even if they were, half illiterate or whatever, sometimes people would make a good point, and you would go, yeah, you know what? Okay, that's cool. That's right. So it's always good to take other people's advice, or to listen. I don't mean take it, to listen to what other people have to say.
Yeah, well, I'll be curious to see how Paramount and JJ are absorbing the feedback on this one. And the thing is, look, I mean, it made a bucket load of money, and at the end of the day, that sort of speaks for itself. I mean, you look at Bethesda, and I think at the end of the day, I think they listened to. I think they listened to me not right. I think they paid attention to what was being said. They made the game they wanted to make. And they made a lot of money doing it, and so now they'll get to do it again. And it sounds like they've brought in there's the Fallout Vegas that they're doing, which they brought in some of the people who worked on previous games, some of the ones that the No More Mutants types would be more approving of. So it'll be interesting to see. And knowing those guys, I doubt it was even a response to the criticism. It was just sort of like, here's an opportunity to bring in some guys who we respect. But, at the end of the day, dollars and cents is how people keep score. And as long as that's flowing, it can be tricky for fans to impact those decisions.
Right. I know that with the Star Trek writers, that it's two writers, and one of them wasn't even remotely a Star Trek person. It was one of the two provided the Star Trek nerd knowledge, and the other one had no familiarity with it, kind of like Luke. And, that was probably for the good. I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know. But I think that it's smart to have new blood on there. And, to be able to do what I was saying that the first Star Wars, the second trilogy of Star Wars movies didn't do, which was just remember to be a good movie on its own and not just be sort of fan service. I think having a writer in there who's just writing a movie, who doesn't give a shit or even know what the fuck a tribble is probably a smart thing.
A to the men, sir. A to the men. Well, I don't know if I don't think we've exhausted the topic by any means.
Yeah, we probably did 45 minutes ago.
But I do know that I want to hear about. I want to hear about your heroics, because I heard you committed an act of heroism, and if that leads me to become a fan of Jeff Green and the Jeff Green Show, and now try to dictate what future acts of heroism you perform, here's your chance. Here's your chance to get the president and treasurer right now.
All right, right on. If you read my blog or saw my Twitter update, I did in fact have an act of heroism yesterday. But what I want to say about that, and I'm really glad that a few people on my blog sent me the link to something called the bystander effect, which you guys, if you don't know about it, should look up on Wikipedia, because I think that's a lot of what happened in my situation yesterday. And it really, overnight, more my act of quote-unquote heroism, what stands out in my mind is what didn't happen with other people that just sort of has me a little bit unnerved. So to back up, what happened yesterday was, and this also ties in actually to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago on the, decision-making at extraordinary moments and who does what and why. Mm-hmm. So what happened was I was walking the dog with my wife yesterday afternoon. A scorching hot weekend here in the Bay Area. We went on a walk to the market. As we were walking back, we round a corner about 3 blocks from our house, and there's a couch that somebody had abandoned on the sidewalk, because that's the kind of neighborhood I live in. And as we're passing the couch, we notice that there are flames starting to emanate from the top of this couch, from the back part. There's just like a little bit of flame going on. It's not blazing yet, but there's fire there. And so the crucial moment is that moment where we're looking at the flame and we look at each other, and without even talking about it, I know we both sort of had this sort of like, my wife and I had this like, is this our problem kind of thing? Like, I would be lying if I didn't say part of me was just like, let's move the fuck on. This isn't our deal. But that only happened really super fast. I mean, and in the next microsecond, we were both like, oh no, fuck, we have to put this fucking fire out. Like, this is crazy. There's a fire in public here. I should say that, again, it's scorching hot and dry. It's an old, super dry couch, and about 2 feet behind this couch is a wooden fence of a house, and even closer than that, a foot away on the curb, is a parked car, okay? And so there's no question all of a sudden that we have to do something about this fire. And my first thought, of course, is to dial 911, but a woman is riding by on her bicycle at the same time, and she pulls out her phone, and so I'm yelling at her, you got it? You got it? You're going to call 911? And she's like, yeah, I got it. And as I'm doing that, my wife takes a blanket that was sitting on top of the couch and throws it over the flame. So that worked for a second because it muffled it. And I'm thinking, okay, crisis averted. But then the next thing that happens is the blanket goes up in flames. And now the couch all of a sudden basically like conflagrates, okay? And so now this is a flaming couch on fire. It goes from like something that's sort of like amusing and weird and sort of an odd thing to see on your Saturday to like a fucking hazard. And smoke starts billowing up immediately from this thing. And we immediately like shift into overdrive there. And my wife and I are both like, bang on doors. We got to get a hose. Somebody's got to be around here to get a hose while this other woman's calling 911. So my wife bangs on a door. I cross the street to where the next closest house is. I bang on a door. And what happens at both of these first houses is that people are home and they don't do jack shit. I can see the people inside the house that I'm banging on, and I'm yelling, there's a fire, there's a fire. And they're just looking at me like I'm probably a psychotic who wants to come in and kill them. And they don't answer the door for me. Over at where the house where my wife is, the guy is looking at the fire. He actually steps outside of his house. He looks at the fire, and he looks at my wife, and he's just said something along the lines of, well, what do you want me to do about it? So
wow.
I go over to one door down from the house I'm at, and because this thing, as I'm telling you, it's like a black cloud of smoke billowing up in the neighborhood now. The guy next door, he's like pulling a shirt on, and he comes outdoors with his 2 little boys, and he's just like, what the fuck? And I'm like, yeah, do you have a hose? Because we got to do something. And he goes into the same mode as I do. He grabs his hose, he throws it to me, I run across the street with the hose, and he turns it on, and then basically I spend the next maybe 7 minutes or so putting this fire out. And as I'm doing it, more and more people start coming out of their homes. You know, it's a scene.
Mm-hmm.
And what strikes me, it didn't strike me at the time, I'm just doing it. I'm just doing what I had to do. I'm putting this thing out and waiting for the fire department. And I don't know if I'm going to succeed or not. I'm just thinking, well, the least I can do is try to contain this thing until the people who know what they're doing get here. So I actually do manage to get it out. But what strikes me the most is not one person comes over to help me. Not one person. And we're talking about like a crowd now. You know, picture any movie with a crowd scene or any accident that you've driven by or whatever scene. You've got the people standing around. It crossed my mind this morning that I never did actually say to anybody, like, get over here and help me. You know, I never asked for the help. But on the other hand, nobody volunteered the help. So that's really the story. The fire goes out. Basically, as the last flames are coming out, the fire department roars up. The fire truck roars up, and they joke around with me a little bit. The guy says, thanks for doing my job. And I head along on my way with my wife and my dog, and that's the end of the story. So, you know, the point of it really is not to say that I'm awesome, though, you know, it was kind of awesome. But that who wouldn't do what I did? You know, it didn't seem like there was a choice, really. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, tell us before we jump in, tell us what you discovered from your readers who weighed in on the bystander effect.
Well, the bystander effect is I don't have the page up on with me now, but it basically states that, and it's based on psychological studies done after the Kitty Genovese case in New York City, that famous case where a woman was stabbed to death and all these people heard it and nobody did anything about it. I recommend everybody listening to this just Google or just Wikipedia the bystander effect, and maybe we'll post it on our site as well. The notion is that apparently there's an inverse proportion between the number of people standing around and the number of people who will actually then do anything about whatever is happening at the time. And the notion being that people will do what other people are doing. So if people see a crowd and they come outside to look at it and they see that nobody else is doing anything, they figure, well, I guess I don't have to do anything either. Or if they see somebody taking care of it, it's not their problem. That's what I wrote on the blog, was that my feeling is when my wife and I, before we had even had the hose, but we were running around on the street trying to get help, there were already people there. More people could have jumped in. Somebody else could have gotten the hose. It didn't need to be me. And what I wrote on the blog was, look, I didn't start the fire, and this wasn't even my neighborhood. The people whose houses these were, who were in danger, they're just standing there while me and my wife are running around like chicken with our heads cut off. And I think the bystander effect sort of explains that, in that, well, there's people dealing with it, so why should I? Which is a weird phenomenon, rather than let's all chip in and help.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what to say to add to that. I think your readers, between you and your readers, I mean, you experienced it and your readers helped sort of break it down. I mean, the only thing I can say is which will hopefully, be relevant, is, coming in, living in New York and just thinking, like, riding the subway in New York, and like how, sometimes you'll have someone get on the train who's aggressive or maybe kind of crazy, or they're saying things that are, they're going into a religious rant, or a racist rant, or an anti-Semitic rant, or something like that. And the thing in New York, which I don't know if it's in the rule book when you get here, or you just pick it up by osmosis, but definitely in New York, riding the subway, you don't engage people. You definitely don't look that person in the eye, because rather than, and the sad thing is if you confronted the person, now it is New York, it could escalate, but odds are they'll probably back down. But what happens is that you don't want the person to fixate on you. So you just, like, eyes lowered, after they leave, maybe you sort of look over at the person standing next to you and, like, roll your eyes like, wow, wasn't that crazy? You know what I'm saying? But it's just sort of, and, New York is where, if I'm not mistaken, is it New York or Boston where the Kitty Genovese thing happened?
I'd have to look it up. I thought it was New York.
It might have been New York, but that's, I mean, it sort of breeds that. But like you said, I think the bystander effect explains it pretty well, but it is still, had, as you said, pretty shocking that in their own neighborhood, the people themselves who would have been imperiled by this thing still had that feeling of, like, hey, someone else is dealing with it. And who knows, since, in our previous episode where we talked about decision making and those things, and how far back into our lizard brains and other parts of the stuff that may go, which is that one of the things that cavemen figured out pretty early on is that fire's got some awesome uses. It's also pretty fucking dangerous. And
right.
So this thing that maybe they themselves, I think, probably couldn't even, they'd have a hard time articulating it in the moment, would probably be pretty embarrassed if it were pointed out to them after the fact. But it's just sort of like, that's fire, that's dangerous, looks like someone's handling it, I'll watch.
Right. I'd just like to think that if I was on the other side of that, if I came out the door and I saw some dude, in a EA t-shirt and flip-flops and shorts walking a chihuahua, I mean, I'm no, like, fucking macho man here in this situation. I'm clearly out of my element. That I would run over and make sure he was okay, or chip in. Maybe I wouldn't. I don't really know. I can't honestly say I know the answer to that question. I'd like to think I would. I mean, the same way that I didn't, that my lizard brain decision was fire, put this fucking thing out, But
well, the other thing, the other thing that might happen too is sort of that is a certain amount of embarrassment setting in. Like if you've watched, like if I'm in the crowd, let's say, and I've watched you for 2 minutes go do working on this thing, then do I start to feel either consciously or subconsciously like, well, if I step in, what if I step in and like, I mean, they're looking at you, you're dealing with it, and even though you're saying you're no hero, or you're not like you're not James Bond or Neo or any of those, or Jason Bourne, you're there, taking things in your own hands and doing it. What if I step forth onto the stage now in front of this audience and I don't look as heroic as you when I'm doing what I'm doing, or I don't know what I'm doing, or I feel like I'm getting in your way, or you're the alpha guy on the scene? Like there's so many things that could play into that. I think the end result of no one pitching in is completely wrong, besides the guy who provided the hose. But
right.
I think,
and in fact, that guy then. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
But just to add, that guy then, he did come over to me. So the one guy who did choose to participate then participated more, because once I had the fire under control, we realized it was flaming from underneath. So he helped me kick it over and get it from underneath. So just adding that detail.
Yeah, that's like hopefully between our fearsome fivesome, we could put together, find like a book that helps identify some of this stuff, because I think the psychology of these kinds of situations is pretty fascinating. But not that you need it, but look, definitely a round of applause here from Vancouver for jumping in.
Well, thank you.
And then writing about it and sharing it, because that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was interesting to me, and I really am trying to do this in a non-braggy way. It was just interesting to me, and I was glad that ended up being what my gut-level decision was, because you don't know what you're going to do in those kind of situations. And again, I'd be lying if I didn't say, like, for 1/2 second, I was just like, Ani, let's get the fuck out of here, But then something else takes over, and you're just like, this is a bad scene. I mean, we look at the fire, we look at the fence, we look at the car, and we see a woman on the phone with 911, and who knows how long that's going to take, so...
Did anyone in the crowd say anything afterwards, or as you guys were on the way? Like, did anyone?
That was another thing. I didn't notice that, or I didn't think about that until the morning. This morning, nobody thanked me except for the guy with the hose.
Wow.
The guy with the hose, as we're walking down the street, he was back across the street. He just yells, "Thanks, man, thank you." But we walked right by other people who didn't say anything. Walked right by him.
See, I think in that particular case, I would have probably stopped and watched the couch burn, or watch this thing burn, because it'd be interesting to observe like what level of threat it takes for the people who are watching this to act. Where instead, like, you acted at an early state, to your credit, and prevented a problem from being exacerbated, and a block of homes being burned or something. But of the same respect, it'd be interesting to know, like, it'd be interesting to observe, like, at what point does the Tower of Flames require action from people? And that might have, embarrassingly enough, that might be what I would have watched. Like, I would have just stopped and wondered, like, how long is it going to take one of these people whose home would be threatened to act?
Yeah.
And just sort of like generally to observe how lazy and pathetic people can be.
Well, right. I mean, in that split second where I didn't act and was having to, like, let's get the fuck out of here, the way, like, many thoughts can go through your head in a very short period of time, I think that went through my head too. Like, let's get out of here. Let's back up, an appropriate amount of feet and see what these people do or not. But I ultimately I just couldn't do that. I couldn't.
You're a hero.
Well, whatever. But
some of us are heroes, some of us aren't.
But I would like to argue. I would like to hope that almost anybody standing there where I was at that moment would have done the exact same thing. I have to believe that about humanity. I don't know.
Well, here's something interesting. Have you ever seen the movie Rashomon?
Yes.
So,
outstanding movie. movie.
Yeah, a fascinating and outstanding movie. So, for those of our listeners who don't know the movie, it's directed by Akira Kurosawa, and it became part of the reason it became famous, apart from being a really good movie, is that you have this story about a confrontation that takes place, and it's told from a number of perspectives. And what a Rashomon or the Rashomon effect has come to be known about is the unknowability of truth. That when you have multiple perspectives, how can you ever decide really what happened? Because the narratives all contradict each other in a variety of ways, and that's true. The movie is certainly about that. But what I thought was sort of the larger meta message, because it's bookended by, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while since I've seen it. This monk who's who's at this, I don't know if it's a shrine or some sort of shelter. They're out of the way of the rain, and they find a baby, and there's another man present who turns out to have been one of the characters in the story. And partial spoiler alert, because anyone who's listening to this really should, and hasn't seen the movie, really should see it. It's phenomenal. But what I felt that what the conclusion was about. When the monk realizes that the monk, for a variety of reasons, can't take care of the child and has to leave the child with the other man who's there, and by virtue of the stories that have been told, has no reason to trust that this person will do the right thing, but has to have faith in his fellow man anyway. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really powerful, and that's one of the themes that sort of, partially because of the phenomenal filmmaking and writing, gets left out when people talk about Rashomon. But that was one of the important lessons I took away from it, and I feel like that's sort of what you're articulating, is that, mm-hmm. As a result of this intense experience that you had, and despite the available evidence in front of you, mm-hmm. based on your own experience, you still feel that need to sort of trust that your fellow human beings would, at least one of them, would do the right thing in a situation like that.
Right. I mean, it's funny because the event itself happened just so randomly and unexpectedly. I mean, we're just going on a walk on a Saturday. I mean, until that point in the day, all I had done is fucking play Pokemon on my couch. I mean, talk about an anti-heroic afternoon. So for something like that to happen, and then we were joking about it on the way home, and it wasn't until I slept on it and woke up in the morning that it sort of hit me like, wow, that was like kind of extraordinary and like kind of traumatic in a way. And even though nothing bad happened, but it was... what's my point? That yeah, I was shook by the lack of help. That shook me, but it is what you're saying. I have to think it's just this phenomenon that people have linked to me, or that there was something that was something along those lines that created the circumstance in which people didn't come over. Because you really don't want to think, when it comes down to it, in a crisis situation. I mean, God, think about United Flight 91, right?
Yep.
That at a time of great crisis that people aren't going to act. I mean, I don't know how we survive as a species if you think people can't rally at moments when their lives are in danger. Not to bum us out on a Sunday afternoon here.
Wow. Well, this is 2 episodes in a row where you've been bringing the bummer stories.
Really? Maybe I'm just a bummer.
I want to go back to something you said a long time ago that I've sort of admittedly been fixated on. You have a Chihuahua?
Well, she's a half Chihuahua, to be fair.
Is the other half a real dog?
Yeah, the other half is a bull terrier. No, it's not really. She's half Chihuahua and half Shih Tzu. And I take umbrage at your real dog comment, sir.
When did you get your dog?
It was a present for my daughter's 11th birthday, if that helps.
Why wasn't your daughter walking the dog then? What's the deal?
Well, she was doing her homework. No, I'm very fond of this dog. I like this dog.
Hey, I like all dogs. I think they're all God's creatures. I love them all.
I never had a little dog until this dog. I grew up with a medium-sized Keeshond sort of mutt. My aunt who I was very close to and my family was close to, they had Irish setters. So I never had one of these little dogs. And they are very sweet and affectionate little things. And, we're not averse ourselves to calling her half hamster or whatever. We make all the same jokes.
Well, if you ever moves to New York, it sounds like you've got the dog part already worked out.
But you got to have a little dog in New York?
Especially in Manhattan, you definitely have to have a little dog.
Yeah. Well, we have no yard of our own here and a fairly small house, so that was the reason.
Nice. Wow. Well,
I'd like to welcome NASCAR to the background.
Yeah, what's going on there?
Ah, jeez.
is that me?
We don't know who...
It wasn't me, and if Jeff and I both heard it, then through the headphones, it was probably there was like a truck that was driving by, a delivery vehicle.
That's weird. I'm 24 floors up, so anyway.
So do you guys have any heroic moments to share so that it's not just about me?
Wow. I'll say something you said that stuck out to me is that, is sort of, I guess, how to phrase it, but like sort of being thankful that you stepped up in the moment, because to a certain extent, unless you now go forth in an elite beat agents kind of way and make a practice of heroic acts, you kind of don't know what you're going to do in those situations. And the closest thing that I can sort of say to relate to that, which definitely won't sound as heroic, so I'm going to caveat it with that, but was that when I was working at Newsweek. Newsweek would have a number of interns over the summer, like 10, 12, whatever, and usually somewhere between 2 and 4 would get kept extended past the summer. Those who had graduated, and some of them might get extended a few times, and then maybe 1 or 2 would actually get entry-level jobs at Newsweek. Well, 2001 was, I believe, the first puncturing of the dot-com bubble, and ad sales and other things were adversely affected. And, the economy was a bit down. And as a result, Newsweek didn't retain any interns after the end of summer, so Labor Day. But then 9/11 happened, and Newsweek brought back all of the interns that were still in New York, that were still in the area, and sent a lot of them into the field, along with reporters. But in terms of like a lot of the writing staff in particular, Newsweek wanted them in the office to sort of do a lot of the writing, and so you had a number of interns who were being sent into being sent into harrowing situations, along with Newsweek reporters, staffers as well. I wasn't. I was mostly doing just like cops and firefighter reporting in the vicinity of Newsweek after I made my way there once the train shut down and stuff like that. So we put out 5 issues in 3 weeks. 9/11 happened on a Tuesday. By Thursday or Friday morning, we had a special issue out. Then we did a regular issue, and another special issue. So it's 5 issues in 3 weeks. And after the first 2 issues came out, so the first special issue and then the regular issue, so it's now the next week, and the managing editor of the magazine sent out an email thanking everyone for the hard work. And I was just in my office, and I was just sort of feeling like, I felt like the interns and the junior staffers needed something a bit more than that, because they've been called back. A lot of them did come back. A lot of them had already been exposed to some pretty harrowing stuff, and I felt like by virtue of what the chain of command had decided, I hadn't been put into any of those situations, but they were, and I was just like, what do I do? And maybe this is sort of like what some of the people in the crowd were feeling, but for some reason I felt a certain amount of helplessness. Like I was in my head and I was like, well, who am I to tell the managing editor that I think that he hasn't done enough, that he needs to go further down the food chain and say something specific? And thankfully, and maybe this is the real quote-unquote hero in this situation, if there was one, was a colleague of mine, Peg Tyre, who actually did a bunch of reporting on Islamic terrorists before any of this happened. But in any case, I told her, her office was next to mine, and I told her, I said, look, this is how I'm feeling. She's like, you should send him an email. You should talk to him. And I was like, all right. And I don't really think I thought it was going to be a career-limiting maneuver, but it definitely felt like, is it really my place to say this? I sent him an email, and I can't remember if he replied to it or not, but the next day, he sent an email out to the people who were in that category and called them into the conference room and thanked them personally.
Yeah.
And that was sort of a big feeling. Just sort of like, it's like I just did it and it was done. It was the right thing to do. I felt it was the right thing to do. The next couple of things that are sort of related, and I'll be a little bit more circumspect on some of the details, but there were a couple of things. One was that none of them had any health care because they're interns, and Newsweek was doing some group therapy, psychological counseling situations and stuff like that. But there were definitely people, like I know for a fact that one of the interns was on the phone with someone who had lost her daughter, and the woman was basically saying she was going to kill herself because she didn't know how she could go on without her daughter and stuff like that. And I definitely feel that, like, while I was fortunate that I didn't know anyone personally who had died or anything like that, there was a way in which that, as reporters, and I'm sure that, the real heroes, like, responders, like cops and firefighters, were dealing with this on a much more intense level. But there was part of me that felt like, okay, we weren't giving ourselves really the time to process what had happened. And then on top of it, we were sort of re-traumatizing ourselves by taking on the stories of other people so that we could relate them to other people, relate them to our readers. So the next thing I tried to do, maybe emboldened by my success, was to try and get Newsweek to come up with some sort of temporary health care for people who are in the situation. And that I was not able to push through. But the final thing was that one of the interns who had no health care had fibroids, and fibroids are partially stress related, and this intern was not in a position to address it, and again had that feeling of helplessness. What can I do? Is this really my problem? That kind of thing, but. As it turned out, I have a very good friend from college whose father is a gynecologist. And I called her. She put me in touch with her father. And I basically paid for it. And, it wasn't at great hardship to me, but it wasn't like I just had necessarily it was just sort of, hey, got free money or whatever. But it was just another thing. Like, I just kind of felt like I had to do something. I did it. And in all of those cases, I had the same reaction that you did, Jeff, which was just that the way I like to phrase to people is like, thank goodness my mother raised me right. But just like, I was glad that I could look back at how I responded in a moment of, I don't know what you would call it. It's not the same as putting out a fire, but I was glad that I did something close to the right thing.
Right. I think really the point of this podcast today is we're awesome. But
not me. I'm the villain who would watch the world just watch it burn until someone else solves it, because I would be interested by that.
I think Michael Caine talked about you in The Dark Knight. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Once it got bad enough, I helped. Who cares? Deal with it.
Well,
that's why we love you, Luke.
There's enough Jeff Greens and N guys to protect couches and uteruses everywhere.
In fact, not only should you be watching while I'm putting out the couch, you should be actively making fun of me, like
nice flip flops,
nice legs on the guy. Exactly, yeah. Welcome to 1976, dude. That kind of thing.
Hey, I remember when Tevas were cool when I was in high school.
That would have been awesome.
And who knows? Maybe a little levity might have actually encouraged people to join in.
It probably actually would have calmed my nerves had Luke Smith been on the side there completely razzing me. That might have actually, made it a lot easier to handle that situation.
I like it. I have a feeling that this is going to turn up in Jeff Green's next game.
So, Luke, really no heroics to share with your adoring fans who already think you fucking walk on water?
I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything off the top of my head now. I mean, if I really sat and thought about it, maybe there was probably something from when I was a Boy Scout. I'm sure there's some sort of like dude fell through the ice and rescue mission type shit. Like I just like I don't remember, man.
Oh sure, you were embezzling the Boy Scout dudes at that point.
Heroic? No, I don't know. I'm not a hero.
I think the Luke Smith fans are just going to be glad that you talked so much during this episode.
I had to, man. No one else is here.
Yeah, you lost your edge, Luke. You used to be so angry.
I'm not. There's nothing to be upset about anymore. I'm having a great time.
Because you don't work for Ziff anymore.
Yeah. I have salary and benefits. I don't have to choose. It's amazing.
One of my great moments at Ziff Davis was when we made one of our periodic meaning those of us in low management jobs, made one of our periodic fruitless pathetic forays to the upper management to try to get better to get pay increases for the editors, and the response was from the management in all seriousness, and also said with some exasperation, "These guys get free games, don't they?"
Whoa!
As if that was the answer to people needing more money to eat and pay their fucking rent.
Well, if you think about it, though, I mean, from their perspective, every $60 game you get is basically saved money on the part of the employee.
Of who?
So over time, all those copies of like Drake's 99th Dragon or whatever, that's gonna equal a fine meal.
Yeah, but it's not saved on the part of Ziff Davis, right? I mean, these games are coming from free from the companies. I just thought it was amusing that like they thought that was going to be enough for the editors. Besides the fact that like, you know what, sir, that's what they're doing for their job.
The lamb with the.
I'd like to welcome.
What's going on there?
I'd like to welcome a new guest to the show. It's background guy.
Welcome, background guy.
Do you have any heroic stories you'd like to share with us, background guy?
Yes.
Who was that? Who was background guy?
I don't know. I think
is that like a Skype party line there?
N guy dialed out to one of those 1-900 numbers you see on USA at 2 in the morning.
I think we actually lost N guy. We lost N guy to party guy.
No, you didn't lose me. I'm just muting the call while the background guy participates. So you guys carry on without me while background guy.
Tell him we said hi.
I will.
Yeah. Welcome to our podcast. You dumb shit.
Have you heard of Jeff Green? He's
I'm a hero.
He put out a couch fire.
I put out a couch fire. Yeah, you may have heard of me on such podcast as out of the game.
You're gonna be big and in demand. When the World Series is over, they're gonna be calling on you. It's gonna be like your bat signal.
Right. For any couch fire in town, there's a couch fire.
You need what would your costume look like if you were
for couch fire guy?
Your flame out is what your superhero name is.
Yeah, the flamer. Yeah, no, maybe not. That doesn't have a good ringtone. I don't know.
No, that just didn't seem to take.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Yeah, I don't know. We need to come up with some kind of design.
Oh, stuff's beeping and okay. All right.
You lost me too there.
Yeah.
My mic just unplugged. I'm back.
It's just going. It's the Jeff Green show, starring N Guy and Luke, is turning into, just one
monologue.
Yeah, one tired kid on a Sunday morning who just wants to go back to bed.
All right, I'm back.
Are you back?
I am back.
Okay, sorry we interrupted the podcast with that personal phone call.
It's good. I thought I was excited to hear a background guy was familiar with Jeff Green. I was going to give him his blog and everything real quick.
His fans, his Jeff Green's fans are legion. They certainly are.
Have you read his Twitter?
Okay. Okay.
So Jeff,
that was pretty fun.
You wanna take us home, or what should we do?
Yeah, I was hoping that maybe background guy could take us out. But is he off the line now?
He is.
Okay. All right. Well, so much for that dramatic moment. Okay. Well, I think that's all we do have time for today. Hopefully, Robert and Sean will be back next time, and you won't have to hear us babbling about Star Wars and Batman anymore.
Nerdy show.
Well, you have to come on. We're dealing with the most up to the minute issues and burning issues in pop culture.
Yeah, we sure are. We didn't even talk about what we were playing, which we don't have to do it now. We'll do it next time, right? Though I will say you should both be downloading Plants vs. Zombies.
Absolutely. I definitely, when I get back to New York and I have some time to play as opposed to doing work for my clients, I will absolutely get right on it.
And then I will be able to posit my theory to all of you, which is that PopCap is now one of the truly great AAA developers.
You know, I said that on the last episode of Listen Up that I was on, and it was slightly ridiculed by the other people on the show. And then
that's because they are fools and morons.
You
heard me say it here. And posers.
Wow.
Well,
this is starting a caste war.
Absolutely. Well, to take it out on an industry note, Jeff, what did you make of Greg Canessa, formerly of Xbox Live Arcade, and then was at PopCap, leaving PopCap to go work for Blizzard on Battle.net?
Yeah, really interesting, but not really. I don't think that that's a surprising move, really. If you look at the pedigree of where he went along the lines, you're going from one amazing place to another there. If PopCap knows anything, it's how to please its fans and how to provide great customer service. So having him on Battle.net, how is that anything but great news? I don't know. I don't know what his role on Battle.net's going to be. Do you?
I believe he's in charge of it. I believe they put him in charge of Battle.net.
Awesome. I mean, look at the success of PopCap, and I don't think there's any question that that's just nothing but great news for Battle.net. So
cool. Well, Greg and Blizzard, we wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, and I'm just kidding about the Listen Up guys. Love ya. Mwah. Kisses.
Absolutely. So give a shout out to Garnet and well, one more thing before you go out. What do you guys make of Garnet's doppelganger, Evil Garnet?
Oh God,
Evil Garnet. Does everybody know about Evil Garnet?
Well, for those who don't, and I don't know, I feel like I'm part of the problem now because by saying this on the podcast, this was a secret. We're making Evil Garnet internet famous.
This won't be a secret anymore.
It really kind of won't. But there's someone there. I mean, to me, quite apart from the writing of it, which is, I don't know. There's some posts that or tweets that Evil Garnet does that are funny, but then there's a lot that's just sort of increasingly mean-spirited and sort of samey, and I'm just kind of like, I really should stop following it, but then it's kind of like a train wreck, and I can't stop following it. But to me, the thing that the best part of the joke almost is that Evil Garnet uses the identical photo that Garnet uses. Yeah. And that's what completely threw me off, and I feel like that was actually a genius move. Yeah.
Actually, the most recent tweet, or actually 2 tweets ago, was just stamped on a kitten's head, lol. So that one made me laugh. But also interesting, I was trying to figure out if I could figure out who Evil Garnet was. And the first person to join the Evil Garnet feed is Garnet, which is very suspicious. Also, in the list of followers for Evil Garnet is the real Shaq. Now, what the hell's that about?
So
that's Shaquille O'Neal. He's a huge, big One Up Yours fan. Shaq and I go way back. Yeah, no, Shaq and I have been friends for a long time. He's really a big gamer. Really big gamer.
So deadpan. But no, I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, I mean, I don't want to necessarily indulge in speculation. You know, could it be Garnet? Yeah, but I don't think so. I mean, it's
There's
like
no way.
The stuff is like some of the stuff there is just so mean spirited and so specific. But the other thing is that which Garnet pointed out to me, and I went back and looked at some of the posts. Is he's pretty sure that the person who's doing it is a Brit. Because some of the slang they use and things like that, but I'm just sort of like, wow, that's interesting.
So that means it could be John Davison.
Yeah, probably it's probably John.
Let's start that rumor. You heard it here first on Out of the Game. Evil Garnet is John Davison.
Evil Garnet is actually my favorite Twitter. That's the only one that I look at every day. So whoever it is amusing me, but I think that's because like the jokes that he makes that are supposed to make you uncomfortable, just they crack me up.
Wow.
I like no offense to any of the people who end up as the butt of those jokes, but I think they're funny.
Yeah,
I think Shane might be bored.
Yeah, we might have to start up Evil Luke Smith. Oh, see, now it's going to be done.
Yeah, see, and the thing is, it doesn't matter because there's no Luke Smith presence or experience on Twitter. So it's like, whatever. No, who cares?
No, that just means evil Luke Smith will get to define you.
No, because I'll just reach out to Twitter and just ask him to shut it down.
Oh.
Done.
Would you do that? Oh, you're one of those guys, huh?
You can do that, yeah, just like the real Shaq. He and I were talking about it back in the day. When he was having his problems.
Back when you were hanging?
Yeah.
When you were having your slam dunk contest in his backyard?
I actually have to use one of those hoops that you get for toddlers, like the little fishing device, like the adjustable, like. That's
and even then, I'm picturing a lot of bricks, Luke.
Wow.
Maybe that's just me, but
The 4-year-olds cringe in terror when Luke Smith comes down the lane.
I'll fucking mow that shit over like Charles Barkley. I don't care. That's my lane. It's my house. I babysit now in my free time.
Another Happy Gilmore moment for... No, wait, was it Happy Gilmore? What was the Adam Sandler movie with him going back to school and fucking beating the kids in dodgeball?
Wow. I was actually going to picture Luke Smith going out more like Denzel in Training Day, where like he goes off on all the cats in the hood, after they turn on him, and where he says like, I run shit here, y'all just live here. I always like that line. Along with King Kong ain't got shit on me.
I think I've said that playing Halo before, actually. Pretty sure.
All right, we're past our expiration date here.
We are.
It's been a pleasure, boys. And I guess we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Absolutely, and
correct?
It's been an honor making my my maiden debut on the Jeff Green Show, starring Jeff Green.
I hope this is the first of many such episodes. I'm happy to have you on anytime, Guy. Luke, I don't know about. We'll see.
Just talk to my agent.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll welcome Sean and Robert back next time. And sorry about all the Star Wars talk, guys.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Goodbye.
Maman vagin. Pipi caca poêle, la